Here is another Reflections on Play video from my games played at LinCon. And this one, Dragons and Banana, don't know whether it was Oak and Banan, which would be and a banana, or Oak Bananer and bananas. And then there would be probably Oak Banan, which is what I thought they said. So it just means and banana. I might get corrected on that one. Well, as it turns out, we played with 5 people. This is very much what people describe as a silly game. But let's think about that. These games go all the way back to the beginning of role-playing and have a noble history. On the one hand, yes, there's tons of stuff in it which is often not welcome in excess when playing anything else. So it's all the referential wit and so on. And then there's also, however, a bit of an excuse when playing such a game for the mechanics to have to be utterly functional. And contrary to what you might think, the rules for such games are not catch as catch can, who cares, doesn't matter what the rules do. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. Sort of like the way comedy is the hardest thing to pull off. The rules have to be pretty solid. So you'll often find a lot of the best game design done under the cover of, oh, who cares, it's just silly. Well, anyway, we all knew that. I imagine you know it just as well as I do, or better. And this is such a game, I think. So let's see here. We have a game where you're building a map. In this case, you actually build the map first very quickly and then roll dice to see where the trail of the quest has led you. It's therefore doesn't really have a game master, because in a game where we are all adventurers on an epic quest, why do you need somebody at the table telling you what you can and can't do and where you are and aren't going to go next? I mean, systematize that up, because it's just as arbitrary, and everybody gets to join in on the fun of being their goofy adventurer. And the logic here, too, is that we're in this to get through the quest, mainly so that sooner or later we get to see every character pull out their surprise, pull out their massive move, their smackdown, or in this game, their banana. So the rule on your sheet is called the Spotlight Banana. For just that reason, you get to do it once, and it is amazing mechanics, awesome, and there you go. Otherwise, the sheet is quite dynamic. Everybody's got their 3 things, which are a resource that you use up in a scene, and then you can refresh. And then everybody's got items. And the items, sad to say, are not long for this world. You tend to cycle through them and use them up and to get more. So that's just going on the whole time. That's pretty much everything on the sheet. The conflict of the situation at any given location is handled pretty straightforwardly. You role play just enough to get into it, and you spend your time, hammering away at it with dice. So this is fairly similar to games that they go back pretty far in role playing, but as far as the last couple of decades are concerned, Clinton Nixon got there pretty early with a game that he called Donjon Crawl, Krawl, hence the pronunciation. And this game, I don't think really was available that long, but it spawned an immense number of influences, imitations, if you like, and persists throughout to this day, directly, indirectly, or just in parallel. These are different from games like Kobolds Ate My Baby, which tends to do exactly the same thing, or Macho Women with Guns, really good example. They tend to do exactly the same thing by using extremely familiar mechanics that happen to have all of the nonsense pounded out of them. So you read one of those games and you're like, okay, this is a system of the kind that I'm very familiar with, and strangely enough, it works better than my usual application of it. Must be because it's not so serious. Well, this, on the other hand, is a little bit more on the abstracted form of conflict, which I think you'll probably recognize goes all the way back to Tunnels and Trolls. And also a game which leaned into comedy more often than not. Well, let's take a look at our characters. There are 5 of us, so it's a lot, and they're not too complicated. We've got the Knight of True Justice. We've got Longnose, who's very good at non-existent magic, leading to some very interesting narration. And we had Gru. This is the player who basically said, "Oh, come on, we know what we're doing here. Why bother pretending?" And Steen, spelled with a Z. So that's a sort of a fantasy fun joke on the word Steen, stone in Swedish. And so really, really good at being lucky, smart, and throwing things. So we had clearly people who were familiar with games where you're picking traits that are all kinds of funky application without being too worried about utterly intrinsic logic. Then, of course, definitely, if not the greatest, maybe perhaps not the leastest, we have my own Pain Song Ebon Blade, whose traits include, from least to most, Darkness Weaving, Blade Master, and the mighty Unutterable Despair. So you can see more about Pain Song in the write-up of the post. But we all sort of enjoyed the slightly non-parodic core of each character. I'm not going to say that we took it, seriously and found the nugget, the thematic, core of these parodies, but played them straight enough so that it was fun to see what each character would do next. Lots of banter at the table, as you might imagine, lots of enjoyable minor suggestions or, sidelong explanations and face palming over them. At one point, I had Pain Song threaten a poem where I said he's writing a poem, and one of the other players instantly wanted to see the poem, which you can read about in the write-up. Well, so I really want to talk about this as a game. Looking at the map, the way it works is that you roll each time after each thing you do to see where you go next, and you add the roll to the number you're on, so it always goes up. And when you finally hit the top number or past it, then you're at the last one. So the quest could go pretty quick, or take, one by one by one by one. We had 7 places, so we actually rolled pretty low throughout. So I think we ended up at 4 or 5 places out of the 7, which clearly statistically is leaning off the top of the curve. It's a curved roll that you're making. So as it turns out, we went to the many. We started, and I think you always start at number 1. We started at the city on the hill, and we visited such places as the Lake of Lost People and the Fertility Desert. Kind of sad. Oh, we definitely spent time in the ruins. Did we ever? Definitely sad that we never got to the Tower of Stupid Wizards. And, oh yes, wait, we had 10 locations, right? Each person does 2. There were 5 of us. And we knew that the final destination, the showdown spot, would be the Rainbow Unicorn Garden.